What's up, everybody, and welcome to Gearist. My name is Brandon. This guy right here. What's up, Aaron? This is Aaron Garrett. How are you, sir?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing well. And today we're going to be talking about the just plain Terra Kiger, number 9 from Nike. Guys, before we get into today's review, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Click that little notification bell wherever it is down below and let us hear what you think. If you ever run in this shoe, please tell us down in the comments below, and follow both Aaron and myself on all the socials, which you can find links to down in the description. Aaron, you and I both tried out this shoe, and as I just stumbled over and said it was the Zoom Terra Kiger, it is for the first time not the Zoom Terra Kiger because there's no Zoom foam in it, right?
No, I think it's got React foam in it this time, which for me was a plus.
It is a plus, and so usually it's had those the Zoom AirPods, I guess I shouldn't say foam, that have been kind of ubiquitous in the shoe up to now. But before we get into any of that, let's take a look at a few of the specs. All right, so first up, let's take a look at some specs. This, in my men's size 11, is 320 grams or 11.3 ounces. Aaron's in a size 13, so a little bit heavier there. In terms of the heel to toe stack or drop, we've got 31 millimeters in the heel, 28 millimeters in the forefoot for a 3 millimeter overall drop, which is a decrease from the previous version. For me, it fit true to size. Aaron, how about you? Did it fit true to size?
Yeah, it felt like a glove, man.
Some of the pros for me were the upgraded, just the really kind of redesigned outsole of this, nice and sticky, good traction, and a very durable upper. How about you, Aaron? Any pros that stand out to you on this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the upper, the ventilated upper was definitely a plus for me. I did like the contrast in the harder rubber on the black section and the softer rubber for the outsoles. And the foam, the midsole for me was definitely a big plus.
Okay, in terms of cons, and this is, we're going to get into this a little bit more, is that there's not really a beefy rock plate. There is a small bit of an EVA rock plate right under the forefoot, but it is very, very thin, very, very minimal. I think that what Nike was trying to do is kind of have some semblance of a replacement, because that's the area where the Zoom AirPods use. What this is best for is probably short to middle distance. I would probably say less than a 50K. And in terms of price tag, this retailed originally for $150, but now it went on a pretty quick sale down to about $105. You can find links to that down in the description of this video below. Way back in 2014, the Zoom Terra Kiger original version, the OG, was one of the first shoes by Nike that was a trail shoe that I had ever run in. And ever since then, I've tried, I think, all of the versions of this shoe, but this is the first time that they've done away with the Zoom AirPods. Here is the Terra Kiger, the Zoom Terra Kiger, number 8. So this is the immediately preceding version to this one. So we have a really direct comparison right here. With them getting rid of those Zoom AirPods, I was a little dubious, not gonna lie. I was curious what exactly it was gonna feel like, and we will get into that a bit in the ride. Aaron, you've tried previous versions of these shoes, correct?
Yeah, I've actually tried the first 2 and the last 2. So 1, 2, and then 8 and 9. Awesome.
What were you kind of excited? I mean, again, because I live in rockier trails, you live in the peatier East Coast style trails, maybe not quite as concerned about the underfoot protection, but that's certainly something that I thought about when going into this.
So the last version for me was definitely a very short tempo only kind of shoe for me. So I was skeptical before putting my foot into it. But I will say after a few runs, I was very excited to continue to run in the newest version, the 9.
So with all that aside, let's take a look at the first part of the shoe that we always take a look at, and that is the outsole. The outsole of this shoe is a complete redesign. Now, what we can see right here, this is the 8. I don't know if the camera is really going to focus on that, but you can see it's kind of almost a very like standardized, you've got these kind of rows of lugs. Here, they've gone with an offset lug pattern, and they have ditched the kind of model number, the like OGRS003, those model numbers that they just kind of randomly throw on the rubber of a Nike shoe. I understand what it means. It's like durometer and durability and so on and so forth, but you can't ever find exactly what it means, so they ditched those things. This is got a firmer rubber on these black sections that you see here, as Aaron mentioned, and then also a little bit, not quite as firm, but also stickier rubber in these green sections in the particular model that I have. Another thing they've added to this are these flex grooves right around here, which kind of frames the big toe, which ostensibly is where the toe pattern is going to go. On even a neutral foot or a pronating foot. On a supinating foot, it might roll a bit to the outside, but that's why they kind of have this toe spring over this way. Then throughout the midfoot, we see even more of the React foam. So in this model, you may be able to see, it's kind of tough, but this section right here was exposed React foam. And this, it's a lot bigger. It's this mint green that we're looking at right here. And I think that part of that is cutting away some of the weight that was there and really, those are areas where you're not going to have a lot of abrasion, so exposed foam there is not that big a deal. So the first thing I'll say is, in terms of my take, is that the redesigned lugs are a win for me. It's not that I disliked the other ones, but in terms of stick and really biting into the ground, these did very, very well. Even on some of that dry, almost sandy, dusty, dirty kind of trail that Colorado is well known for if you run here, this did a good job in biting into those things. Because some of the time that, especially when it gets to be like sand-ish, like and by that I mean a larger grain than just dust, it can act like a bunch of ball bearings under your foot. You can slide off that. But this bit into that well as getting a really good purchase on rocks and flat surfaces and things like that, where again, traction can be a little bit tricky to find sometimes. Aaron, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree on a lot of those comments. For me, here on the East Coast, we have a lot, as you can see, there's a lot of dirt and mud on mine. But I've got a lot softer ground. I don't have that nice compact dirt trails. Ours are, you know, what you've mentioned, the peatier, mossier, sandier ground. The Outsole did a fantastic job kind of molding to when I needed to grip the trail a little bit more, whether it was flat or uphill or downhill. The multi-directional lugs underneath supported the grip, while the reverse lugs in the back really gripped going downhill. So I never felt out of control or like I was going to slip.
I have about, I want to say 60 miles in this shoe. As far as durability, it looks great. The primary place that I see any real wear is kind of right, almost directly under my metatarsal heads. But apart from that, I think the durability is very, very good. Again, on the previous version, and it's difficult to see, but the lugs kind of have this almost rounded out feel. There's not as much bite, whereas these have a reverse overhang. So like the lug, it's like a, what kind of, I don't know what kind of polygon it is. I can't remember, like a rhombus maybe, but it bites into the ground, especially when going up and downhill, which is definitely also an update from this shoe. Did you notice any durability issues, or yours doing really well?
No, I mean, I didn't, again, I have about 40 or 50 miles on mine. I haven't noticed any wear and tear, you know, to speak of. I will say I do feel like the lugs have reduced in size compared to the 8. If I look at the 8, the heel especially seems to have maybe deeper, sharper lugs than the new 9, which for me felt better. But as far as durability goes, this has, you know, really performed as you know, as advertised.
Yeah, they do a good job, and they are a little bit, seems a little bit deeper, kind of broader. These are on the Kiger 9, they're 4.5 millimeters deep. I may have already said that, but it bears saying again. Moving away from the outsole and into the next section that we always talk about, which is the midsole, and this is probably one of the most, I would say, vaunted changes in this shoe, and that is getting away from having the Zoom Air pods like they have in this shoe and purely into a React foam, which is exactly what the midsole of this is made of. The first thing that I'll point out is that we've got, again, 31 millimeters of stack in the heel, 28 millimeters of stack in the forefoot for an overall drop of 3 millimeters. Now, as far as a trail shoe goes, again, I feel like the Zoom Air pods really offered a bit of underfoot protection because there was no rock plate really present in earlier versions of this shoe. Those Zoom Air pods meant that you didn't have to worry about what was poking through, but in this case, they're gone. In their place, there is that thin piece of EVA foam, and quite frankly, Nike doesn't even advertise that as being a rock plate at all. But it is there, but it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like putting a sheet on you to keep you warm at night. Does it keep you warm? sure, like warmer, but you're not going to be warm. All right. So in terms of weight, because I feel like this is where this is going to go, this is about 20 grams lighter than its predecessor. So in terms of ounces for us Americans out there, that's about 0.7 ounces, so almost a full ounce lighter. I don't know if that is a result of just the midsole, if there's some other changes. I will say that holding these both in my hand, it's interesting. I feel like the sole unit on the Kiger 8 and the sole unit on the Kiger 9, this one feels heavier. Again, I don't know where, if it's only 0.7 ounces difference. Maybe this is making up a bit of that balance, but it feels like it's quite a bit heavier in my hand, which is interesting. In terms of actual protection, I didn't really miss the Zoom Air pods, right? I think it did a good job. And if you've run in this shoe before, or you're just kind of used to running, feeling out what trail shoe is appropriate for what trail, you're probably going to know not to take something like this onto a super technical, very sharp rocked piece of trail that's going to beat you up. Which, quite frankly, it doesn't really matter how beefy the shoe is, you're going to get beat up on a trail like that. But I feel like it did a good job. We'll talk again more about this in the ride section coming up. But yeah, overall, it performed really, really well. It's held up well. I don't feel like there's any crushing to speak of. But it held up well. Aaron, what did you think about the midsole of this guy?
Yeah, I mean, from a standpoint of comfort for me, this React foam was softer under my foot than the previous Zoom Air. I did not miss those Zoom Air. I do not miss those Zoom Air pods at all. For me, they were kind of bothersome. The midsole reacted well for me, especially when I picked up the pace on like those trail tempo days to really get some turnover. I like the way that it felt underfoot. I haven't felt any crushing or bottoming out of the shoe after 40 or 50 miles. So it's, you know, from a durability standpoint of the midsole, it's really held its own. So for me, the midsole was a delight upgrade.
Yeah, it's a good upgrade. And again, it feels, did you notice, like, I mean, I don't know if you have the 8 sitting in your hands, but next time you get a chance, kind of hold it like by the side and you can feel a little bit more weight pull from the outsole or just the sole unit generally on this. It's kind of interesting to feel, you know? Now we're going to move into the upper of the Kiger 9. And this is also, again, it's kind of a mixed bag, actually. There's some things that were changed quite a bit and some things that don't seem to be changed at all. The first thing that I will mention is the engineered mesh. Now on this shoe, it is more of an open weave. Again, I don't know if the camera is really going to show you that. This is a little bit more closed weave in terms of the exterior mesh that you're going to see there. It does a good job keeping debris out. We'll get into that in a second. The interior mesh feels almost exactly the same. This shoe has, again, just kind of a backing mesh that is all the way from right about here all the way down to the toe. It's nice and smooth. It creates a breathable feeling throughout the shoe, all of those sorts of things. As we get into the laces, the lacing is pretty much identical. There's not really any difference except for on the 9, or excuse me, the 8. There's a little bit of stitching down here where that is absent in this. So fine. On the internal structure, this is actually a change. For the internal structure of the 8, there are structural pieces sewn into the exterior mesh, and that's where that structural integrity comes from. On this, and it's difficult to show, you may be able to see it, where there's kind of behind the swoosh here, a little bit of white sticking out. There's an interior, I'll try to show you this piece right here. There's an interior, almost canvas. I mean, it's, again, an engineered mesh backing structure that is creating whatever structure there is in the shoe and going into the laces, under the foot, all those sorts of things. The tongue is about the same. I mean, it's a little bit of a graphic and kind of layout design change, but in terms of feel, it's a good amount of dense foam. I don't want to say thick, but it's dense, so it protects the foot without being overly puffy or anything like that. The heel, the rear foot of this is a big change. The first thing is that the Kiger has been kind of this experimentation ground for Nike for a few years with the toe loop, or excuse me, not the toe loop, but the heel loop, the pull. They went with something very traditional this year, which is good. I mean, you can pull on it like that. You can put your finger through it, no problem. So fine. But also in the 8, you can see that there's almost this collar that kind of wraps around the ankle there. That's gone in this. This is very smooth, very sleek, very unipiece. You know, it's one big piece back here. I don't want to say big in a negative way, but all the foam is incorporated. There's not like channels of foam trying to grab around the malleolus and then the calcaneus and things like that. It's just very smooth and almost kind of minimal, like deconstructed and kind of broken down into a single unit instead of all the parts standing on their own. We're going to take a look first in terms of what I thought about the breathability of this. I do think that it is a nicely breathable upper. It's generally been the summer that I've been running in this. It is a more closed off mesh than this guy. So I do think that the airflow on this is a little bit better, but honestly, not by any sort of real noticeable amount. My feet weren't hot, they weren't cold when I did some higher altitude runs in the spring and things like that. Very, very durable. It does a great job. In fact, over my miles on this, there are basically no rips or tears or anything like that. And I will tell you that I have kicked the hell out of some rocks and roots and things like that without wanting to. To that end, and I should have mentioned this in the construction piece, this toe cap is a little bit beefier than it was in the previous version. In this version, the toe cap really only wraps around the medial side, kind of on the inside of the foot, but this time it goes both around the medial and lateral side, providing a little bit more protection there. That interior structure, again, I like that. It's very silky mesh backing that I talked about a moment ago, but the support structure that is in there really made for a secure fit. So your foot, despite, you know, we're talking about this more in the fit section, there's a good amount of room in the toe box here. But if you tie your laces properly, there's not a bunch of sliding around to the foot to make you feel unstable, when you, especially when you get into off-camber situations. And then the final thing I mentioned is the back end. I like that a lot. Now, I really liked this. I think it's very cool and almost that collar feel where it kind of really locked in the ankle and the heel there. This is very, very smooth. People that may have experienced some chafing because the edges of foam in the previous one, even though they were soft, are going to be thrilled, I think, with the really smoothing out of all the pieces of this and creating a single unit there. Aaron, what are your thoughts on that upper?
Yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of the same thoughts there. For me, the toe piece, the little toe protection. I've got roots. I don't have rocks here, and I have kicked my good fair share of roots. So did very well. I liked it. I like the lockdown feel I got, especially across the tongue. While the tongue is relatively thin, it's got that good padding, especially across where the laces sit. So it didn't hurt any of my tendons or nerves up there. And for me, again, the heel that you mentioned, I felt like the 8 almost had like a gap between where the foam set below the collar, and I would get little bits of, you know, little bits of dirt and things like that kind of sitting on top that would eventually wiggle its way down. That's gone with this more traditional kind of like road shoes style heel cup that I like very much. And again, I've got no rips or tears. I did run through the mud and through the rain, and it drained extremely well for me. So, which isn't a far departure from the previous model, but you know, running in 90 plus degree weather and 80% plus humidity, my feet never got like overly sweaty. And when it did rain, it drained real well. So the upper for me was what they kept the same was good, and what they changed I think was good as well. I'd say there's no updates to the upper that I would take away. Okay,
now as we get into the fit section of this review, again, as I mentioned earlier, fits true to size. I do feel, so it's interesting, the Kiger is a wide base, right? This is the outsole profile, or the midsole profile, and it's very stable because of that. So the fit is actually almost all the way to the exterior of the midsole kind of profile there. There's plenty of room in the toe box. I will say also that, and this is just kind of a product of what this shoe is, it's a very low profile shoe, right? So it's not like built up in this area, but despite that, it feels as though there's plenty of room in the toe box, both for splay and for wiggle, especially when your feet get swollen, things like that. There's nothing that stood out to me to say cramped. Those updates on how the upper is put together, I think complement the overall fit of the shoe, including how it interacts with the midsole there. And the final thing that I'll say again is that it runs true to size. There's no wide version of this shoe, but I would say that if you've got a wide foot, you can probably make this work. I mean, it's really going to be kind of a crapshoot depending on how you fit in with Nike more broadly. But it's not super narrow, so you may still be able to make it work depending on where your foot is widest. Aaron, thoughts on the fit of this guy?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the fit is it's a good fit, right? It's true to size. I'm a 13, so I'm a bigger boy. I have a normal size 13 foot, so it's not wide, it's not narrow. I have a normal arch, normal heel. I don't have Achilles problems, so the heel cup for me was actually really good. Plenty of room in the toe. It looked to me when I first opened the box, it looked like maybe it was a narrow forefoot, but putting my foot into it, it really felt like I had plenty of width in that toe, especially kind of around the balls of my feet and my toes. You know, low profile, so it did sit, you know, close to the top of my foot, but never felt like I had, you know, too much or too little. There's no bunching of fabric, so there was no hot spots formed. I will say my laces did sit a little wider than some of the shoes that I run, but they never felt like I had, you know, there was too little fabric there. You could crank these down. I could crank these tight like a football, but I do think there's enough at the top to where if you did have a wider foot or your foot was swelling, they would it would complement that just fine. So fit was great.
And now, depending on who you are, probably the most important part of this review is how did it ride, right? How does this perform? The first thing that I would say is that it is important to understand that this is not going to be your ultra marathon, trail marathon shoe over technical terrain. It may be at one of those shoes in rotation if you're kind of swapping out shoes depending on the length, but it's not really meant for that either. So they're not claiming to go 200 miles and be fine on your foot. That, again, as Aaron said, is more the Wild Horse or the Zagama or whatever that is. This does really, really well on a lot of the trails that I like to run on, right? So we have, again, in the Front Range of Colorado, there's no shortage of trails to run on the buffed out single track and the really smooth stuff, even if it's rolling, this crushes it. Like, I love that. I love to open it up. It would be cool to see something like this with a bit of a carbon plate or something to give a little spring. Again, I mentioned that in one of my Salomon shoe reviews that I did recently. When it gets to that smooth stuff, that's where I feel like those things shine. On the Ascents and Descents, it's not so important to me. This does a really good job of being very nimble and lightweight. It can handle some of the technical stuff. Again, I'm not really one who's going to seek out super rocky and stuff that you can barely run over without fear of breaking your face by falling. So the things that I like to run on, this is ideal for that, and it makes it one of my daily drivers. Aaron, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this, again, like you said, is a shorter distance shoe. I've actually liked to wear it during my tempo days on the trail, whether it's doing some repeats or just, you know, a long, you know, 20-minute tempo run on the trail. I feel like I can pick up really good, get that traction. The ride for me feels good. I am scared to run probably more than 10 miles in it out of fear of what it would do to my foot after, you know, kind of a long time on feet in these. But outside of that, yeah, I mean, I could run a 5K, a 10K, maybe even a 10-miler kind of race shoe, but also anything on the trails, especially if it's damp. Good, solid, everyday kind of shoe for me there.
Absolutely. And I think those distances are... Whoa. You okay? So I think that in terms of distance, that is indeed a good spot with these. You can, again, go up to 50K if you want. I think it's about the tolerance of your body. It's also about what type of trail you're on. So just kind of judge accordingly. So overall, I really think that this is a good evolution of this shoe. It's not world-changing. I think that the ditching the Zoom AirPods is a change that some people may have been a little bit trepidatious about. I don't mind it. It sounds like, Aaron, the Zoom AirPods being there bothered you a little bit more than it did me. It wasn't really that way for me. I looked at it kind of as more underfoot protection. But in this shoe, the React foam does a good job. I think that EVA rock plate, as some are calling it, I think that is a wild overstatement to call that a rock plate. But it does offer a little bit of protection, especially in kind of some of the nagging rocks that may be underneath. Overall, the performance is very good. And for the price point, I mean, at $150, good price point. At $105, which is where this is right now as we record this, great price point. I think it's a great, I don't want to say entry level, it's a good 5 entry levels to somebody, right? It's your first shoe, but it's also the one that you're going to be going to for years. I would also say, because you mentioned a couple things that might allude or lead people to think that it's a hybrid shoe, this is not a hybrid shoe. Yeah, look, any shoe is a hybrid shoe if you put it on pavement or a road shoe. I've seen people running like the OG Kenvara on trails, so anything can be a hybrid. This is not a hybrid shoe by definition. You're going to probably burn out those lugs quicker than you want to, so I mean, if that's the way you want to go, maybe take a look at the peg trails or something like that. But this is not that. This is a pure kind of thoroughbred trail shoe. Really great shoe. And before we go anywhere, I want you guys to let us know down in the comment section below if you have run in this shoe. Have you run in this shoe, the 8s? Do you want to get your hands on these? What are your thoughts about the Kiger, kind of almost now in its 10th iteration coming up next year, which I'm sure we'll talk about? What are your thoughts on that shoe? I think it's one of those that's not really going anywhere anytime soon. And when it does, everybody's going to kind of go, oh, remember the Kiger? It'll be kind of weird. You guys, please leave a comment. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Follow us on the social. That guy is Arron, A-R-R-O-N, G-A-R-R-O-D on Instagram. I am Gearist on Instagram. Follow us on all those. Leave a comment down below and subscribe to this channel most of all. Thank you guys so much. Go out there, get dirty, and we'll see you next time.